And the neighbor told her, you know, I saw the SS troops came in, they picked them up and took them away. After that day, my mother never saw her family again. Okay, good morning or good evening at your place. I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles. And let me start by introducing myself first. So why don't you show my slide, my name. So as you can see, my name now is Jerry Weiser. As I share my story with you, you'll understand why I said that my name now is Jerry Weiser. But in order for you to understand where I'm coming from, I'm going to start with my late mother's story first. My mother was 19 years old when World War II broke out. So why don't you go next slide, please? Here you can see her. She was 19 years old, like I said. She was born in a very small city in the southern part of Poland. Next, please. You can see it in the red circle. It's the southern part of Poland in a very small city by the name of Tarnów. If you look on the map, you'll see on the west side of Poland is Germany. On the northeast side of Poland is Russia. The World War II broke out on September 1st, 1939. The first act that was in this war, that Germany invaded Poland. 7 days later, Russia invaded Poland and they split Poland in two. This is how World War II started. It took them 5 weeks and 1 day to occupy Poland. Poland didn't really have a serious army. They came on horseback and the German came with tanks. So you can imagine it wasn't a big war. It took them 5 weeks and 1 day to occupy all Poland. Now, one thing I have to bring to your attention, that the German didn't invade Slovakia. You see, Slovakia is on the southern part of Poland, and the city of Tarnów is right on the border. The reason that they invade Slovakia was because Slovakia had a fascist government, so they didn't have to invade. They just marched into the country, and some people even greeted them with flowers when they came in. Next slide, please. And here you can see how they greeted the German troops when they came into Slovakia. About 3 weeks after the war broke out, my mother came back and she found out that her parents, her younger brother, and her grandmother are gone. She was looking all over the city for them and she couldn't find them. Finally, she contacted one of the neighbors, and the neighbor told her, you know, I saw the SS troops came in, they picked them up and took them away. After that day, my mother never saw her family again. And here she was left, a 19 years old girl with no profession. She didn't know how she's going to survive. So she decided the best thing for her will be to cross the border to Slovakia. Since Tarnów was right on the border, it wasn't a problem. So one evening, she packed up all her belongings and she crossed the border to Slovakia. When she got there, she was looking for a job. She arrived in a tiny, tiny city by the name of Žilina. You can go to the next slide, please. And here you can see the city of Žilina in the red circle right on top, right on the border of Poland. When she got there, she found out that one of the rules that they already implemented was that a Jewish person can only work for a Jewish person. And since this was such a tiny city, there were very few Jewish people in the city. So she had a very hard time finding a job. But after a couple of weeks, she found an elderly lady that she looked for help in her house. So my mother took the job. She was very happy that she found it, and she started working for her. After a few days, the lady came to her and she told her, you know, my neighbors are already asking about you. And since you don't have any papers that you are a citizen of Slovakia, it might be dangerous for you to stay here. So I suggest for you, why don't you move to a larger city and you can blend in and nobody will know that you don't have any documents and you can stay here. And she suggested to her, why don't you move to the city of Bratislava? Now, Bratislava is the capital of Slovakia. It's a big city. And she told her, if you take my advice and you move there, you don't have to look for a job because my daughter lives there and she needs help in the house. So you can start working from day one in her house. So my mother took her advice and she moved to Bratislava. She didn't have any problem finding the family, the Engel family. They were pretty known in the family. The husband was a very known personality, a very successful businessman. He was an expert in coffee, and he was importing coffee from all over the world. And he had a warehouse with over 100 employees, and his wife was helping him in the business. So they were a very successful family. And my mother started working for them, and she was very happy that she has a job, and the job was great. After several weeks, she met a young gentleman, and they started dating. Now, after a few months, they decided to get married, but it wasn't so simple because he fled Poland too. And on top of it, they were both Jewish. So there is no way they can go to the city hall and get a license to get married. So the only choice they had was to live as husband and wife. On September 6, 1941, I was born. And the name that was given to me was Henry Uri. This was my first name. When I was 3 months old, my father, who was an electrician by profession, worked in a factory in Bratislava. And one evening, he didn't come back from work. My mother went to his workplace and was looking for him. And she found out from the other employees in the factory that the SS troops came, they picked up all the Jewish employees and take them away. And here my mother was left all by herself with a 3-month-old baby. She didn't know how she's going to survive those conditions. But meanwhile, they started building a ghetto in the city. So what is a ghetto? They took a neighborhood, a small neighborhood, and they built a brick wall around it with barbed wires on top. Basically, they built a prison. And now they forced all the Jewish people to move to this area. Next slide, please. And here you can see them walking to the ghetto. They told them, leave your apartment, everything in it, you'll get back to it later. Just took your valuables with you. So you can see here in this slide that they are forced to march to the ghetto. And notice that they're all wearing a Jewish star on their coat. This was one of the rules that every Jew, the minute he leaves his apartment, walks on the street, he has to have it. So he can be identified as a Jewish person. Now the condition in the ghetto were horrible. First of all, it was so crowded, it was overcrowded. And some people, they housed them 6 families in one room. So you can imagine those conditions. The food was scarce in the ghetto. They had to fight for a piece of bread. This is how bad it was. And some people were so weak, they started dying on the street. Some of them from disease and some of them of hunger. This is how bad it was. When I was 7 months old, my mother was forced to go to the ghetto. The minute she arrived and she saw those conditions, she said in her mind, there is no way a 7-month-old baby can survive those conditions. So she said, I have to find a way to smuggle the baby out of this ghetto. Because already there were rumors that they're going to liquidate the ghetto and send them all to the camps. So luckily, there was a lady, she was a volunteer, that she has a pass to go in and out of the ghetto. She was a nurse, and she came to help the women in the ghetto. I mean, she couldn't help much. There were thousands of them. And she came for a day, but she felt that she's doing something good. So she came to the ghetto twice a month and helped the women. And my mother approached her and asked her, listen, I have a 7-month-old baby and he cannot survive those conditions. Are you willing to smuggle my baby out? And the lady agreed. She said, by the end of the day, I'll come and I'll pick him up. Well, in the evening, the lady came and my mother prepared me. But can you imagine a mother giving up her 7-month-old baby that she might never see again? But she thought that this is the only chance that the baby has a chance to survive. So with a heavy heart, my mother gave me to the lady. Now the lady took me and she put me in her medical bag and she smuggled me out of the ghetto. Before she left, my mother asked her only for one favor. Please let the Engel family know where you're taking the baby. So at least somebody outside of the walls of this ghetto will know where the baby is. Now you have to understand that the Engel family wasn't forced to go to the ghetto. And the reason was, since they had such a successful business, the German confiscated his business and gave it to one of the sympathizers. But the sympathizer didn't have any idea how to run a coffee business. So they forced the Engel family to run the business for him. So for a while, they were safe in the city. Later on, when the condition got really bad, they paid their way and they escaped to the Tatra Mountains. This is how they survived the war. Meanwhile, the lady smuggled me out of the ghetto. Now, what did she do with me? Well, she deposited me in the city church. But the church couldn't keep me for long because they were hiding other Jewish children, and the authorities used to come and inspect all the public places, including the churches. So somehow they had to find a way to distribute those kids outside of the church. So they started sending the children to the church members. And I was sent to a farmer outside of the city. This gentleman was a God-fearing gentleman and a very brave one. He took me and he hid me for 3.5 years till the end of the war, not only from the authorities who used to come and inspect all the homes to see if somebody is hiding a Jewish child or a Jewish adult. And not only that, he had to hide me from his neighbor, his good neighbors and friends. Because if they'll find out that he's hiding a Jewish child, they'll tell the authorities and they'll get a reward for it from the Germans. So you can see how brave this gentleman was. Meanwhile, the lady deposited me in the church, you understand? Meanwhile, they liquidated the ghetto. Now, what did they do? They started loading him on a train. They sent her first to the first city that she crossed the border. Next, please. To the city of Žilina. Before that, I skipped something that I want to tell you about. One of the things that they had in the ghetto is You know, the Germans were very good in propaganda. And one of the things that they did, they printed money for the ghetto. And here you can see a 1 mark, a German mark. But what special was about it, this was to be used in the ghetto only. And you can see on top, on the left corner, the Jewish star. And on the other side of the note is a Jewish menorah. They wanted to show the world that everything is normal in the ghetto. People have money, they are buying, they are selling. There was nothing further from the truth. There was nothing to buy and nothing to sell. The only thing that they used this money was, they took the valuables from the people who came to the ghetto and gave them this piece of paper. But meanwhile, their purpose was to show the world that everything is normal. They even had a minister of propaganda in the German government, and his name was Goebbels. He was a good friend of Hitler's. This is how important it was for the government of Germany, of the Nazi regime, to do propaganda, to spread their ideology all over the world. Finally, my mother was loaded on the train and she was sent to the city. And she arrived in Žilina.